After the downfall of a feared figure known as TBS at the Federal Polytechnic Ilaro around 2004, the entire institution and its surrounding areas were thrown into a new state of uncertainty. For years, TBS had commanded influence and respect. His presence shaped the atmosphere on campus and beyond. But when he fell, the balance of power shifted dramatically. In the absence of TBS, two confraternities, the Airlords and the Buccaneers, rose to the forefront. Almost overnight, their activities began to dominate the institution. What followed initially was a period of quiet. Students, staff, and even residents of Ilaro felt a sigh of relief, believing that with TBS gone, tension had finally subsided. But this sense of calmness was deceptive. It was only a fragile piece waiting to be tested. The real test came not long after when the Buccaneers announced their annual party. This was not just a small gathering but one of their biggest traditions, held every year without fail. Members traveled from different campuses and states to attend. That particular year, the chosen venue was a popular hotel situated close to Adeyemi Extension, along Oritepa. The hotel's hall, popularly known as Femi-Mecho, became the center of attraction. On the day of the event, the environment was filled with Buccaneers from across the country. Yellow towers, berets, and other insignias linked to the group were displayed boldly, leaving no doubt about their presence. It was a grand display, one that brought together their members in large numbers. But the choice of location did not sit well with the Airlords. The surrounding environment of that hotel had long been regarded as their base of influence. To them, the Buccaneers' decision to host such a large and flamboyant gathering there was not just bold, it was provocative. It felt like an intrusion into their space, a move that could not be overlooked. Within hours, whispers started among Airlord members who lived and operated in that axis. They watched as Buccaneers moved freely, celebrated openly, and dominated an area they believed was under their control. Many of them saw it as a direct challenge, a public display meant to undermine their authority. The mood quickly shifted. While the Buccaneers enjoyed their annual festivity, the Airlords quietly debated their response. Some suggested caution, while others argued that allowing such a bold move would weaken their own standing. By evening, it became clear that what began as a joyful reunion for one group was already sowing the seeds of a serious crisis. The calm that had existed after TBS fall was beginning to crack. What looked like just another party was, in reality, the beginning of something far more dangerous, a confrontation that would shake the institution and the entire Ilaro community. As the Buccaneers' annual party continued at Femi-Mecho Hall, the atmosphere in Ilaro grew louder and livelier. Members had come in from different states, and the gathering was as massive as it was colorful. Music poured out from the venue, and the surrounding streets carried the energy of the event. While the main party was still in full swing, a group of visiting Buccaneers, those who had traveled in from another state, decided to step out and explore the neighborhood. By late afternoon, around 5 p.m., these outsiders found themselves heading towards Adeyemi Extension. For most students and locals, Adeyemi Extension was a well-known zone. It was not just a residential area but also a recognized stronghold of the Airlord confraternity. The Airlords had a long history of influence there, and their presence in that environment was well established. Unaware or perhaps unconcerned about the sensitivity of the area, the visiting Buccaneers entered a bar within the extension. The bar was buzzing with its usual crowd, and at one corner stood a snooker table where a few young men were enjoying a game. Those men, unknown to the visiting Buccaneers at first, were members of the Airlords. The Buccaneers, full of energy from their ongoing convention, decided they wanted to take over the table and have their own round. What began as a casual request quickly turned into a heated exchange. The Airlords were not ready to give up their turn so easily, and pride got in the way of compromise. Voices were raised. Words were thrown back and forth. At first, it looked like an ordinary argument about whose turn it was to play, but beneath that, the tension of two rival groups was quietly building. It was only as the quarrel grew more aggressive, when shoving and confrontational stares replaced mere words, that the Buccaneers realized the men standing before them were not just ordinary players but members of the Airlords themselves. In that moment, the simple disagreement over a snooker table took on a different meaning. Instead of backing down, the Buccaneers pressed harder. Their confidence was fueled by the fact that their annual party was still ongoing just a short distance away. They knew they had numbers on their side. If anything broke out, reinforcements could arrive at any moment. With this mindset, they grew bolder, raising their voices and making it clear they were not going to step aside. The Airlords, however, were not the type to be intimidated on their own ground. For them, Adeyemi Extension was more than just a hangout, it was their home base, a symbol of their dominance. To be challenged there, in front of locals and fellow members, was an insult they could not overlook. Every word spoken by the Buccaneers only deepened their anger. Very quickly, the situation stopped being about snooker. The old rivalry between both groups resurfaced. Memories of past conflicts returned, especially the ones left behind from the period surrounding the fall of TBS. That history was still fresh, and though there had been a quiet spell in recent months, the bitterness had never truly gone away. Now, with the Buccaneers standing in their territory, speaking with boldness and threatening to overshadow them, the Airlords felt provoked. What started as a simple misunderstanding at a bar had opened a dangerous chapter, one that carried the potential to ignite violence and drag the entire campus community into another round of unrest. The argument was no longer just a quarrel about who would leave the snooker table. It had become a symbolic contest of power, pride, and boundaries, and neither side was ready to step down. Among the Airlords present at the snooker table that evening was a figure known by the nickname Old School. To avoid confusion, it is important to note that this Old School was not the same popular Airlord who had once studied at Ilaro Polytechnic. This one was different entirely. He was an Airlord from another institution who had only come to Ilaro on a friendly visit. His purpose was simple, to spend time with his friends and brothers who belonged to the same confraternity within Ilaro. But fate had other plans. When the disagreement at the snooker table broke out between the Buccaneers and the Airlords, Old School found himself in the middle of a storm that quickly began to spiral out of control. What seemed like a minor quarrel escalated into something much bigger, reopening the fragile wounds left by past conflicts. The tension spread fast. Word traveled through Adeyemi Extension and into the surrounding streets that an altercation had taken place between the two rival groups. As the arguments turned into heated threats, the Airlords decided it was time to make their presence felt more strongly. Within minutes, their strike team, often called the Hit Squad, moved into the open, patrolling the area and preparing to defend their ground. Old School, despite being a visitor, did not remain on the sidelines. He took the lead with fiery determination, his voice carrying weight among the gathered Airlords. To him, what had happened at the bar was not just an insult, it was a direct violation of their space and pride. He rallied the group, and before long, a decision was made to strike back. Not far from the main convention venue, their target emerged, a young Buccaneer known as Saburi. Saburi was newly initiated into the Buccaneers. Unlike the older, more experienced members, he was still fresh, eager to prove himself, and deeply excited about being part of the gathering. In fact, he had been among those who worked tirelessly to prepare the Femi-Mecho Hall for the annual convention, decorating it ahead of the event. But Saburi's personal story made what happened next even more tragic. He was the son of a lecturer at the institution, a detail that made his involvement in the confraternity even more sensitive. On the day of the party, Saburi had already been heavily under the influence of alcohol. Witnesses would later recall that he had been drinking long before the main event even started, and by evening, his state left him vulnerable. According to several accounts, it was Old School himself who struck first. Leading the Airlords with a level of aggression that shocked many, he went straight for Saburi. Reports suggested that he personally carried out the attack, with other Airlord members backing him up. The fact that Saburi was not in a stable condition only made him an easier target. When the dust settled, Saburi was gone. The news of his downfall spread quickly, shaking the Buccaneers to their core. What was supposed to be a night of celebration had suddenly turned into mourning and rage. Members who had traveled from far and wide could hardly believe it. A newly initiated member, one of their youngest, one who carried the pride of decorating their convention hall, had been taken down just outside the venue. For the Airlords, the act was seen as a retaliation, a statement that their stronghold could not be violated without consequences. But for the Buccaneers, it was a provocation that demanded a response. Within hours, Adeyemi Extension was no longer just a neighborhood. It had become a battleground for influence, respect, and survival. And at the heart of it all was Old School, the external Airlord whose unexpected visit to Ilaro had now placed him at the center of one of the fiercest confrontations between the two rival groups. Within the story of that fateful period at Ilaro Polytechnic, one detail has often caused confusion over the years: the existence of two different individuals who shared the same nickname, Old School. The first Old School was an external member of the Airlords. He was not a student of Ilaro Polytechnic at all. He came from another institution and had only visited Ilaro to greet his confraternity brothers. He was the one alleged to have led the retaliation that claimed the life of Saburi. His actions, as reports would later claim, became the spark that turned an already tense situation into a full-blown disaster. The second Old School, however, was entirely different. This one was a student of Ilaro Polytechnic, and he was widely known across campus. Unlike his external namesake, this Old School had a reputation for being calm, calculated, and even diplomatic. Though he belonged to the Airlord confraternity, many people on campus respected him for his friendliness. He was said to have friends even among rival groups, something that was uncommon in such a charged environment. Beyond that, he was active in student politics, often mingling with people across different circles. Because of their shared nickname, many people who heard about the events years later mistakenly believed that the well-known student, the popular Old School of Ilaro, was the same one who allegedly struck down Saburi. In truth, he was not even in town when it happened. According to multiple accounts, the student Old School was far away in Lagos on that very day, attending to personal matters. But events at Ilaro had already begun to spiral. After Saburi's fall, the Airlords, realizing the storm they had stirred, quietly disappeared from public view. They knew too well what was coming. A reprisal from the Buccaneers was almost certain. The atmosphere across Adeyemi Extension and within the school community grew tense. Students whispered, avoiding certain areas and keeping indoors. Nobody wanted to be caught in the middle of what was clearly about to unfold. The Buccaneers, meanwhile, were thrown into grief and anger. Their annual convention, which had attracted members from far and wide, was shattered. What was meant to be a celebration turned into mourning. The hall they had decorated with so much pride was abandoned. Drinks, food, and meat went to waste as the party was abruptly cut short. The entire venue grew tense, the joy of the gathering replaced with frustration and rage. They searched for Airlord members but found none. The Airlord's sudden retreat left the Buccaneers boiling, their anger unresolved. It was at this point that fate turned cruel. The student Old School, the one who had been away in Lagos, returned to Ilaro briefly. His intention was innocent. He had come back only to pick up an important document from his house. He was at home, unsuspecting, when tragedy found him. According to reports, a lady who lived within the compound informed the Buccaneers that Old School had returned. Fueled by grief and anger, they invaded his house. What followed was heartbreaking. In the presence of his younger brother, who, ironically, was himself a Buccaneer, Old School was attacked and lost his life. His younger brother, powerless to stop it, could only watch as events unfolded. The story of Old School's fall left deep scars on the institution. For many students and staff, it was a painful reminder of how quickly violence can turn friend against friend, and how lives filled with promise can be cut short in the heat of rivalry. The fact that he was known as calm, friendly, and politically active only made the loss heavier. What began as a misunderstanding over a snooker game spiraled into chaos that consumed lives and destroyed futures. Years later, the tale of the two Old Schools still lingers in the memory of Ilaro Polytechnic and its surrounding community. And so, the lesson remains clear: cultism brings nothing but pain, loss, and regret. The streets may remember the names, but families live with the scars forever. Let us all reject violence. Choose peace. Choose life.